You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take.
Plan. I'm the enemy, because I like to think.
You can travel like a Bobby doll. You can hang out like a biker's mom. You fit in anywhere you go. Bring your own style just to steal the show. You shine it so loud when I'm flowing yourself. Drink with a light, you drink and smoke on your bed. Love by all yourself, you know. You're always involved, you're the star that show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show today. We've got some cool stuff going on. We've got JP from a few projects that you may have been aware of. The current one being Noirlem. Looking forward to chatting with him about that. And also a couple of his past projects, one of which I have here, Eudaimonia. Excellent book. And we're going to be talking today about realism in storytelling. What makes a story seem real versus fake? Why is it that as readers, we seem to pick up on a vibe, either that this is something contrived and we don't really get into it, or we just get immersed into the story. And for however long the outside world will leave us alone, we're in the world of that story. So I want to say welcome back to Mr. Russ Leach, who's been away for a little while, taking care of this, taking care of that. It's good to have you back, Russ.
Yeah, good to be back. It's nice to have an hour to sit down and chat with the chat and with you and with Josh. It's nice. So it's been a bit chaotic. We've had storms over here. I've had hospitalizations. I've had all kinds of rubbish. Garbage in America. All kinds of awful things happen, but we're all fine. Everything's cool, and it's back on with it now.
Yeah, glad to hear that you guys are on your feet and still putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, just.
JP, how are things going in your neck of the woods?
Oh, well, I just saw my thermometer ticked up. We're up to 20 degrees today, so that's nice. We were
nice.
The winter ends here, and you think that you're going to be going back to spring, and then it just drops down to single digits. So we're celebrating.
Which part of the country are you in?
Spokane, Washington. So it's like eastern Washington.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the sane half of Washington.
Yeah, yeah. I was working out this morning outdoors, as I do, and it was about 38 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 3 degrees Celsius, Russ.
Is that right? Okay.
And for San Diego, that's cold. We normal winters, we get that, we get those temperatures. And then when you add in the wind from the ocean, full of all that water, it'll chill you right to the bone. But yeah, we've had these for the last several weeks, we've had a couple of heat waves come through, and it felt like late spring, early summer for a week, and then we'll have 2 days of winter again, and then another heat wave for a week. And so anyway, enough about that. I'd like to welcome everyone in the chat. Hockey stopped by for a bit to say hi, and then he's off to work. Good to see you, Hockey. Shadowhawk Backs, hello, my friend, and welcome. Phil with Zaid Comics, good to see you, Phil. Statistical Zero, good to see you. Laykick1, thanks for joining the show. Appreciate it. So I wanted to more or less just dive right in with JP, who in the last several weeks or so has been a little bit of the talk of the town in certain areas of Comicsgate for good reasons. You've had some great videos you've done over the last few weeks about what it's been like for you with crowdfunding, the highs and the lows, and what you've learned and how you've applied those lessons toward your current campaign, Noirlem, which we will be taking a look at. And then you've also been, I think, releasing some really interesting videos for a little while now about storytelling just in general. And you're one of the relatively few people I'm aware of in independent comics who has not only, published several books, but prior to that, you were published in other mediums. So I was wondering, for anybody who's not really familiar with your story, if you could just kind of briefly give us the rundown on how you got into writing professionally, and then how that led you to comics and CG and where you're at now.
Yeah, so I kind of emerged out of academic circles. I graduated from University of Oregon only like 3 or 4 years ago. And so when you're coming out of academia, you're spending a lot of time really dissecting dissecting stories and poems and all of these things down to the finest of details.
Yeah.
So that I kind of brought a lot to the table in terms of I spent a lot of time working on studying the mechanics of storytelling, all of the different parts and pieces that go into that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I spent my first year out of university just trying to get published, you know what I mean? Like getting short stories and poems and that kind of thing published. And then at some point I kind of, I took a comic studies class my senior year.
Mm-hmm.
And as like a final project, I had done basically written all of Eudaimonia, I think I'd written like 40 or so sonnets that went into the story. And part of the project was to do something comic related, and I made it into a comic book. And I thought it just worked so well that I just kind of took that idea and just ran with it. And what I found was that my style of writing, my style of storytelling, which is to be as precise and concise as possible, like not a single word wasted and nothing superfluous, was just kind of perfect for comic books because, comic books are all about using as few words to accentuate, what we're seeing on the page and having those things work together.
Sorry to interject. If only other writers would see it that way.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Nobody in particular, Bendis. But so it just seemed like a natural fit for my writing style.
That's great. Yeah, I agree completely. Ideally, in any form of writing, you don't want to have a single word wasted, but there's so many instances in various mediums where we do see there are many words wasted. And with comics, I agree that, ideally, you want the writing to complement and enhance the visual storytelling that's there because, clearly it's a visual medium, and the art is what most people are reading comics for, more so than the writing. But when they work together, I just don't think there's a more effective storytelling medium personally, because you've got the visuals, and if those are done well, then the writing enhances those. And at that point, the reader is so immersed that as they're reading the words, then the visuals are then enhancing the writing. And so it's this positive feedback loop. And I remember growing up, there was a bunch of different comics that I was reading, but not all of them were comics that I would read beginning to end and then immediately go back to the beginning and read it again. And when I started noticing that those were the ones that really stood out to me as being quote unquote good. The others might look good, but those ones that I wanted to read again immediately, that that was a cut above the others. And I think it, like with Eudaimonia, for example, this was, maybe it's that because I'm a history nut, and this was a story that took place during an actual historical event and during a real time period. That certainly drew me in, but it's just the way that the story is told. Even though it's very unconventional in how it's written, I was drawn in immediately, and I stayed in there, until the last page. So when you are trying to, whether it's Noirlem or Eudaimonia or your next project, when you are trying to create an immersive story, what are the things you're thinking about?
Typically, what I'm trying to do is, if you think of a story as being a series of waves, and you
Mhm.
have, really interesting things, and then you have not so interesting things. My goal when I'm writing is, and I guess it's because I come from a poetry background, and if you read poetry, poetry is kind of the act of taking something mundane and uninteresting, but making it sound so artful and presented in a way that it makes it seem interesting.
Yeah.
So when I'm writing, my goal is to make those lows as high as I can, to push them upward, so that if you have the interesting and you can make the uninteresting more interesting, then you have more of an even kind of a flow to things. And I think it makes for the kind of thing that, like you said, you're gonna stay invested in, you're gonna want to return to again.
Hmm. And Russ, I'm curious with you. You've said multiple times publicly that what you love most about comics is the art,
Mm.
and that a lot of times you'll buy something just based on art alone, and the
Yes.
story doesn't really rate one way or the other. For the books where you have found yourself actually reading them and being interested in the writing as a way to supplement, the art that first pulled you in there.
Mm.
What is it that is there anything in particular that you look for when that happens, or do you just kind of notice it after you're already in it?
It's completely accidental to me. I don't necessarily go looking for it. I can remember comics when I was a kid, that I would read again and again.
Hmm.
Like the Marvel and stuff I was reading, and some of the DC stuff. I remember the Captain Britain, rereading the reprints inside, and
Yeah.
simply because it was just so much fun. The stories, literally, they were just fun. So it wasn't so much about the art then, because all comic book art was just amazing.
Yeah.
When you're 9,
Yep.
like everything's just fantastic. So I wasn't being picky about what it looked like back then. And then as a young man, I think the one that hit me the most on rereadability was Swamp Thing,
Hmm.
and I bought the first few trade paperbacks of the Animal Swamp Thing, and I could not stop reading it. I had to go and buy them all, so I got like all 12 or 13 volumes of them, and I
Hmm.
read the whole lot, front to end. And it wasn't about the artwork. I just desperately wanted to read, and the story hit something in me. It was great. Which is no which is no surprise from Alan Moore.
Yeah.
It was amazing writing, and that did actually make me think more about stories and less about the art at that moment in time,
Hmm.
because I'd been affected by a story more than just this is great and exciting. Something actually reached out to me and caught something inside. But I have to be honest now. I'm attracted by the art. Although, if the elevator pitch is good enough, I will pick a book up for the story. If
Hmm.
something excites me, if I see an elevator pitch on a crowdfunder, on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or whatever, and it makes me think, then I will go and buy it and see what happens. But it would have to have good art as well.
Yeah.
because I am that shallow.
So, JP, when you were growing up, were you reading comics?
I was, but it was something that I didn't take seriously until I returned to it. You know what I mean? Like it was just something to do.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it wasn't until I took it honestly wasn't until I took that comic studies class in college and we were assigned to read like all of these great works. Um, and it was like after spending so much time analyzing literature
Hmm.
and seeing comics held up next to that, it was kind of like a revelation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, to see just how valid of a medium it actually is. You know what I mean? It's something that a
Hmm.
lot of people would kind of look past.
Right. It's sort of regarded as kid stuff or
Yeah.
something that, maybe it was popular in the past, but then society grew up or something along those lines. Yeah. It's interesting. One of the things that I've noticed, I'm not the only one, many of us have noticed this, in various different storytelling mediums, from film to TV to comics to novels to video games. I mean, you name it. It seems like, along with the injection of a whole lot of socio-political messaging, there's also been a simultaneous reduction in characters to these very flat, two-dimensional, sometimes one-dimensional tropes. And it's almost like the creators of these things, in their effort to push messaging that has nothing to do with escapist entertainment, have forgotten that if people aren't interested in characters, and if they're not invested in what happens to these characters as though they're real people, then chances are whatever specific sociopolitical messaging you've got is going to appeal to a very small percentage of the people that you could potentially be reaching with your stories. And so one of the things that I've liked about your guys' work, um, with comics, many other people's work with comics, is that the characters are interesting. And even if we are working in a medium where there are certain recognizable tropes that we not only use, but readers often want to see, they're popular because they like that sort of stuff. To me, it's the characters that are ultimately going to pull the reader in and convince them, just for however many moments it takes to be immersed in that story and to read it, that what's going on is real. At least in the reader's imagination, it's real. It's all happening. Um, what do you guys think about that? Do you think there's more to it? Do you think that's somewhere in the ballpark?
I would say for me, like you were talking about characters, I would say for me, a really good character is like a fishing net, in that the fishing net goes through the water and it clears things, but things still get through. So if you have a character that is, let's say, good, there are still parts of him that make it through the net. There are still
Mm-hmm.
flaws and complexities. A
Yeah.
bad character is a tarp that just sweeps everything. Nothing bad comes out. Nothing, you know what I mean? So, or I guess you could say like an eclipse, where you can see shimmers of light coming through out of dark, and
Mm-hmm.
shimmers of dark coming through out of light. And I think bad characterization tends to be because there is, you know, now we can't really allow good characters to be complex and bad, or bad characters to be complex and good. Uh, we're not getting those fishing nets anymore. We're just getting those tarps that are all encompassing of one of those two traits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mo Big says, you can tell Josh lives in a coastal state from his analogies: waves, fishing nets. Yeah, we get lots of those, more waves than fishing nets here in San Diego. But yeah, you want to charter a fishing boat, they got nets for you. So Russ, when it comes to characters that have really struck a chord with you, like with Captain Britain, what was it about Captain Britain versus other characters, whether it was, you know, a very British character like Judge Dredd or a very American character like Spider-Man? What was it about Captain Britain that really hit you and then got you to stick with them as you were going through the years of reading the stories?
Well, I actually left Captain Britain after it went sort of the whole Excalibur thing.
Oh yeah,
I wasn't into that at all. I liked the original version of Captain Britain. I liked it at the time. I liked it because it was a British superhero. So there weren't many of them.
Yeah.
And I could see myself in the pages of the comic book.
When you're a kid, that might convince you to pick something up off the rack, because it sparks your imagination. Like, oh wow, you know, subconsciously it's like that could be me. But
there was that connection. There was that kind of Captain Britain is British.
If you're an adult and that's still happening, I might raise an eyebrow. Rock on with your bad self, but that's not how most adults tend to look at fictional characters.
The bizarre thing was, by the time actually it got to the really good story, which was the Red Skull and Captain America, I was super excited to see Captain America. Because obviously, you know, I was aware of all the American comics. I had picked up the odd few. My parents had, you know, bought them for me. This was just the first one that I bought for myself. And yes, after that, and during that time, I was picking up 2000 AD as well. So, you know, love British characters from there, which were very different to American characters.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that one stuck out to me because of that. But looking at for instance, the characters in the Swamp Thing saga, they stuck out to me because it's Alec, isn't it? Alec. I can't remember his last name. Holland. That's it. Alec Holland. And then and effectively, spoilers. Swamp Thing isn't Alec Holland. And that was crucial. That aspect of it, and the fact that he became an elemental. He was actually a reforming of something that was always there, and the way they went to hell, and that whole thing was completely magical. And Alec Holland and him actually finding out he wasn't Alec Holland, he was something far greater, just with Alec Holland's characteristics, as it were. And that spoke to a deeper aspect. It spoke to spirituality. It spoke to I don't know, karma and reincarnation, all kinds of things, which I was quite interested in, still am. And so it struck a chord. So for me, I think, you know, you're not going to love every character out there. You're not going to connect with every character out there. But in order to enjoy a story, those characters must have certain traits to them that kind of make them not believable. I don't know that it's about realism or believability. It's like when you draw in shorthand, and you convince the eye that things are happening. And I think with characterization, there's a little bit of that involved. You kind of convince yourself, or you convince the reader that this person has, or this character is rounded, that has more aspects. Because especially in comics, you don't have a lot of time to actually go deep into the character, maybe over a long period, over a long run, but you have to do that in bits. So you kind of have to convince the reader that the character has depth, and there's shorthand ways of doing that in writing. Not that I'm an expert on that, but I can see that from the way comics are. So I kind of see it a little bit like the artwork, in that you use these shorthand ways to convince the reader, and then build on those as you build the story and build the character over a series or over a period of time. So that's why, that's just another pointer to the fact that both art and story are equal partners in comic books. There's no
Yeah.
one more important than the other. When something's working right in a comic book, it's
Mhm.
because they're both there in equal measure.
Yeah, I agree. And what you're saying reminds me of something that we were talking last night on Late Night with Comicsgate on Michael Bancroft's channel. We had Narwhal on as the guest, and he was talking about interactivity in storytelling, and that it strikes me that for comics it really works well. When it's really working well, it's on two levels. One is the interactivity between the visual storytelling and the written storytelling. They're working interactively together to create this unique experience for the reader that we don't get in film or video games. We don't get in traditional print novels. But then there's this interactivity between the storytellers and the reader. And I think one of the things JP does very well with his stories, both the comics and actually on your YouTube channel, the videos you've created where you essentially are just telling stories. But the stories have very specific points, and you're telling them in a way where you're encouraging the reader to engage with, or the listener or viewer rather, for YouTube, to engage with it in a way where they're bringing something to it, rather than only being a passive listener or a passive viewer. And I think, you tell me if I'm off base here, but it seems to me, JP, like one of the things you enjoy with storytelling is that sense of interactivity, where the reader, in the case of comics, or viewer listener in the case of YouTube, where they're going to bring in something from their own life experience to the story that you're providing. Is that accurate?
I mean, yeah, definitely. The video essays have been a lot of fun. They've been really great, not just for me to kind of put myself out there, but to kind of work out my thoughts in the form of a story.
Yeah.
I find that like that process is really helpful for kind of refining everything about like building a personal philosophy. And I think another key thing about it though is that I don't really have answers. You know what I mean? I'm still working these things out. And
Sure.
so if a viewer can see that, maybe they're on that same path that I am. Maybe they can
Mhm.
kind of hear my perspective on things and have that sort of interactive relationship where we're both sort of working on that together.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that's definitely part of the appeal, is, at least for me as a reader, or reader of comics, or a viewer of YouTube, I look forward to that interactivity. Part of it is just the interactivity between my imagination, my memories, whatever it is I'm bringing uh, into this exchange of information, let's call it. Um, and I look forward to whatever it is, somehow bringing something new that I didn't have with me already before I started watching that video, or listening to that podcast, or reading that comic. But then there's also the what's the phrase for it? It's the I can't think of it. It's gone. I lost it.
Well, the other thing I want to add is, and it's something that's kind of consistent with my writing, my videos, the fact that I have Eudaimonia comics and the book is called Eudaimonia. So I'm fiercely Aristotelian,
Mm-hmm.
which means I don't really have the answers. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if people come in expecting to have an answer, whether it's, to a story, whether it's to the meaning, I would much rather ask you a series of questions and have you kind of work that out along with me. And that's in storytelling or the video essays.
So when it comes to Noirlem, which we're looking at now, what is it that you're wanting to bring to the reader? I mean, clearly you're wanting to make comics, get the stories that you've got in your mind, get them down on paper, get them in front of readers. What is it that you're hoping readers will get out of this particular story?
I am hoping to. So Noirlem is it's a lot of things, but one of the biggest things it is kind of introducing a new character to the archetype of the deductive reasoning using detective. I think 1920s Harlem is a sorely underused aesthetic. I am hoping that people are going to come into this story and help solve the murder mystery along with the heroes. Have a good time with it. Be able to go back and reread it and look at all of the little breadcrumbs I've left that pointed to the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And like these complex characters enough to be looking forward to their next adventure.
And you mentioned 1920s Harlem, otherwise known as the Harlem Renaissance. What is it about that time and place in American history that appeals to you?
So it's one of my favorite periods for literature, art, and philosophy. One of the interesting things that happens when a people is liberated, like this is throughout human history,
Mm-hmm.
one of the first things that they do is they set up a artistic movement. So, America, we're free from the British. No offense, Russ. We immediately go into
everyone can make a mistake.
we immediately go into forming like transcendentalism and American expansionism, and this entire artistic identity built on exploring and conquering nature. And so the Harlem Renaissance is basically a miniature version of that within the United States, in which Black Americans, they left the South after Reconstructionism kind of failed. They go to major cities and they start creating their own kind of artistic identity. And it's
Mm-hmm.
it's one of my favorites because I personally like the urban aesthetic in writing and art.
Mm-hmm.
Eudaimonia was basically me kind of conversing with the writing of World War I, and now Noirlem is me kind of conversing with the Harlem Renaissance and everything I enjoy about it.
Very cool.
Cool.
Looks
let's
nice
check
as well.
Let's check out the trailer. Where did you get the violin music for that?
Oh, I'm a sucker for cello. One of the lessons I learned from my third campaign was don't use copywritten music. So I just started scouring the internet for public domain, I guess. Yeah, like just looking for different kind of string instrument pieces that I thought would fit the mood of the story a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It works.
Yeah, it's effective. And as far as the visual aesthetic, I noticed you went with a watercolored look. What was the reasoning there?
Well, I I think people tend to think of noir, like the noir aesthetic, as being having sharp contrasts and colors. And when I started looking at colorists, that's kind of what I was looking for. And I was just kind of trying out different people.
Mm-hmm.
And I just happened upon Mariam Yasser, and I had her do a page, and I loved her work so much that I just said, to hell with traditional noir looks, and just kind of ran with it. And I love it. I love the colors in this book.
It's nice stuff.
I'm going to bring the campaign back up here. So, as far as the options here, you've got the book. You've got a digital version of the book. And then where do we go from there?
That is the entire Eudaimonia Comics digital library for $30. It's more than 200 pages. But you get Eudaimonia number 1, number 2, How to Die, and Noirlem. And then from there, you can get a physical copy of the book along with a really sharp gold Zippo with the logo on it. Has that cool sound that...
Yeah, show that one more time now that you're full screen. Yeah, that looks cool.
Every detective needs his trusty Zippo.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bundle there if you want to get a little bit of horror with your mystery, and you can grab a copy of How to Die, both variants and Noirlem together. And there is the first edition bundle where I only have a few physical copies of Eudaimonia left. So if you want to grab everything, I think I have a couple of those left. Oh, sorry, I forgot. There's a 2-pack there if you want to save on some shipping and get one for you and a buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And the retailer bundle if you want to grab 5 and a lighter.
Cool.
Oh, wow, I only have 3 left. Yeah.
So looking at the artwork here, it seems like you've really chosen to make the most of your setting and incorporate 1920s Harlem as a character in the book. Is that accurate?
It was... Sorry, I got distracted by the chat. What was the question again?
Oh, I was just going to say, it just seems like from the artwork I've seen so far that you incorporate 1920s Harlem, the setting, as a character in the book, similar to, let's say, Gotham City for Batman.
Yeah. I've been saying that, like, when you see the 1920s, you tend to see, like, the glitzy, glamoury, roaring 20s side.
Mm-hmm.
This book is a little bit more blue-collar, old Manhattan town, like the places along the Hudson River in Harlem and near Columbia University. So, yeah, there's just a lot of, there are little side characters in the book that are, they're just trying to do their job. They're just trying to get by. Yeah, so trying to nail those parts of the city that aren't as documented as, say, Katz's Deli or the Rainbow Room, like things like that. Like I'm going for a little bit more of like kind of rough around the edges part of town.
Mm-hmm. And did you have any particular stories from the time period that you drew on for inspiration, or was it more kind of historical research for you?
So the serial killer in this book that they're hunting is based on a guy who did... I don't even know what to call it. He did these kind of clandestine operations for the State Department where he would use psychological manipulation on the public to kind of manipulate the events going on. When he was younger, he worked for ad agencies in New York and did the same thing. He would have these, wild parties where he would where everybody had to wear a certain color or smoke a certain cigarette because he was selling different, he was working for different brands at the time.
Yeah.
And so the serial killer is basically inspired by the idea of like, what if there was a killer who did that, who wanted to manipulate the public through news of these killings that he's doing?
Mm-hmm. And then as far as the architecture and the way that these characters are moving through the city, was there particular historical reference that you went with, or was it more this is kind of like your version of 1920s Harlem?
So I studied everything from old street maps of New York to lunch specials at diners, so it would be correct for the time, to prices, to lingo. So I spent a lot. I would go on these just kind of go into these rabbit holes of like trying to make everything feel as accurate as possible, down to the finest of details.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it shows.
So
And
if you're going to read the word dewdropper, you might have to look up what that means.
uh-huh.
But it was an expression.
Yeah, that one of the things I remember as a kid really enjoying about comics is when I would come across a word or phrase, I had no idea what it meant, and so I would go to the dictionary and look it up. And if it was, compelling enough, I would then go to our set of encyclopedias my parents had in the house, and then try and learn more about that particular thing, whatever it was.
Yeah, so we use the term cougar now to describe, an old, a middle-aged or older attractive woman. Back
Mhm.
then, they had the same term, but they would say bear cat.
Yeah. I remember coming across that a long time ago. I can't remember what story it was, but yeah, you're absolutely. So as far as the project progress is going, it looks like your line art is completely done. Colors are about halfway done. Is the book being lettered as it's being colored?
No, because the letterer is using the no outline speech bubbles.
Yeah.
So we were going to move on ahead, but then we realized, well, that's going to be kind of awkward if you do that. Yeah, Eric. Yeah, so basically the letterer is waiting for the colorist to kind of... Letterer is working at the colorist's pace.
Gotcha. Cool. And I thought this was an interesting addition to the campaign page. Tell us what's going on here.
Well, if you've ever seen the movie Major League, where the Indians win a game and then they go back to the locker room and they peel off a piece and they have a goal that they're trying to reach, that's basically what this is here. So
Mhm.
for every backer, another piece of the next cover gets revealed, like the cover for the next project.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I swear it's all done using random number generating. I'm not withholding the face.
Mhm.
That's purely decided by the computer.
So it looks like for stretch goals, the first one was reached. So everyone's going to get a free print along with whatever they're buying. Your next goal is at 6,000, and we are. Wait a minute here. I see what you did. Okay, so you're revealing what the $5,000 stretch goal will be when funding hits that.
Yeah,
and the rest, I see. Got it. Sorry, JP. I'm a little slow this morning, as I am in most mornings.
No, I owe everybody a print.
So, everyone, if we get the campaign to 5,000. Then we will get a free print along with the book.
Do it.
What has been your... we talked about, you having done other books, Eudaimonia 1 and 2, How to Die, and now Noirlem. What has the overall experience of crowdfunding been like for you?
To go back to what I said earlier, it's been like waves. Eudaimonia number 1 got about 100 backers. Eudaimonia number 2 got about 125, so I'm going up. And then How to Die went back down to 100. So that was basically the point at which I had kind of checked out a little bit and started doing the thing where, I just disappear and then come back with a book and like, hey guys, remember me? And then disappear again, which not only does it not work, it really isn't very fun because you're not connecting with people. You're not building any friendships. So I put out that video and it, I'm sure a bunch of people have seen it, but the response to it was great. I've been totally happy with it. But as soon as I put it out and people started responding to it, I realized that I was being a hypocrite because I haven't done what I said I was going to do in the video. You know what I mean? Like I have a campaign going on. So until this campaign ends and I stick around, then I won't be a hypocrite. So for right now, I'm basically a hypocrite.
Well, I was checking out your channel yesterday, and I noticed that you had, in the beginning, it was, you doing videos solo, and then more recently, you've been doing live streams with the co-host and bringing on a guest.
God, those things are so much fun too. I know we're not good at it yet, but those are a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody ever starts out being good at it. I mean, I certainly don't feel like I'm good at it, and I've been doing it for a while now. I don't know how many 100 hours I've got in live streaming, but it's definitely not a natural, intuitive sort of thing for me. And I don't know if I personally know anybody that thought that it is. So as long as you're enjoying it, I think that is the most important thing as far as trying to keep momentum going, keep coming back and turning the camera on.
I think the top 5 was a good idea. I don't know if you've watched the stream yet, but the top 5 is a lot of fun. We have a different subject every week. We ask our guests to make their top 5 of something. Try to keep it something that the chat is going to be interested in. So there's a little bit of like, banter going on in the chat.
Yeah.
We can rip on each other for our picks. This week we're doing our top 5 animated shows of all time, so that should be fun. But like just trying to keep things like chill, drama free, and something that's fun to interact with for the chat. And no fudge.
So where do you hope to have your comics career go from here? I mean, obviously in the immediate term, you want to have more success with your campaign, bring in as many sales as you can. I imagine you want to have a great print run and then send those orders out and have happy customers. But beyond that, what would you like to see happen?
I tend to think of things temporally, and for me, it's basically I have X amount of years and Y amount of stories, and I want to get as many of those stories and books out to people as I can, as long as I have time on this earth. Anything beyond that, I don't think about all that much. For me, it's just about I want to be a storyteller, and however many people want to support that, I'm grateful for. If I can get more, great. But if you've already come on board, I'm happy to have you. And I appreciate you spending your time and resources to help me get these stories out to people.
Russ, you've had a very eventful last several months, an eventful year if we count the successful fulfillment of Only Death Can Save Us #1. So you've had some highs and some lows. Where would you like to see things go for yourself as a creator, and where do you think indie comics in general are headed over the next year or so?
Wow, that's big. I don't know where indie comics are going. I don't think anybody has for a long time. I mean, when I was buying comics prolifically when I was a young man. Indie comics were exactly that. Sometimes black and white, sometimes printed on, from photocopiers and stuff. And indie comics have two way. You can look at it two ways. I mean, some people call Image indie, and Dark Horse, which is people like that, which is rubbish because they're obviously corporate.
Right.
But I think crowdfunding has still got a huge part to play. I think there is the possibility. I really would like to see maybe whoever it is, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, somebody actually make a comic store. So a particularly focused. So we looked at that. What was it? That Zoom or
Zoop?
Zoop. That's it. And there were several. But I'd really like to see something like that take off, where it becomes more available to the general public. I want to see more people who don't necessarily read comics today reading comics in a year's time. And I think I'd like to see them enter via indie comics rather than via mainstream comics. Whether that's going to happen or not, I don't know. But I think that's probably where it needs to go. It's such an open-ended question. For myself, I just want a broader audience because, much like Josh, I just want to get my stories out. I just want to get my creations out there. It's a bit more difficult for me because I do have publishing schedules with other publishers with gigs as well as my own work, so I can't fully focus on my own work to the detriment of anything else. I can't do that,
right?
Because I have to pay bills and stuff, like when half your roof flies off in a storm. But it would be nice if I could do that, but it's not something I can do. So I think just for my personally, I just want to be as prolific as possible. I just want to get as much work out there as possible. I want people to see what I can do and enjoy what I can do. Hopefully, I can inspire someone else to do it as well, to be creative, if nothing else. And then my job's done. Outside of that, if I can entertain people with even more stories, especially for Only Death, but for anything that I work on, I do. My passion is definitely all ages, kids to all ages books. So you can have dynamic, fun stories that don't talk down to kids, like comics used to be, basically. Yeah. So anytime I get an opportunity, and I'm very fortunate, I can't say a lot about it, but I've got that opportunity at the moment with a couple of publishers, as well as with yourself. Obviously, we work together on Outliers, and the fact that is all ages as well, and Only Death Can Save Us is all ages. So that's really where my focus is as far as my career is concerned. I just want to get as much. I want to be as prolific as possible and continue to entertain with all ages content.
Eric Hupful says, want to be more accessible to the general public? Get on Amazon or into gas stations. A comic website like Zoop is no better than Indiegogo for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely 100% agree. And something along those lines is actually in my future. So I won't say any more at the moment, but I will be revisiting that whole subject very soon. So
yeah, it's we're in such a time of flux, that the rate of change seems to be accelerating every year. It started several years ago, and I mean, obviously there always was some amount of change, but now it just seems like things are changing so fast. It's almost impossible to stay ahead of it.
No, I don't think you can. I think all you can do is react and just get yourself into as many places as possible. Get out there, be accessible, be open to to people being able to ask you about projects that you work on and the work that you do, the stories that you want to tell, and be polite. It's always worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to take just the last few minutes to talk about something I showed at the beginning of the show here.
Yes, I saw that.
I showed a little surprise. I hadn't
That was
said
lovely.
anything to Russ about it. And as soon as I can get back to it over here, I got too many windows open. So I've been working with Pedro Ang on doing some animation for the Outliers. And one of the things that he did for me is a little video ID for the Outliers as a property. And we showed off the brand new logo that I've been working on for a while. And Mr. Michael Bancroft, who joined us in the chat, is the one who produced this logo based off of a design I had another graphic designer come up with. And then Mike and I were talking one day, and he said, I think you could probably do a little more with the logo. And I looked into it, and the graphic designer I was working with earlier didn't have the technical capacity at that time to do it. And Mike's like, well, why don't you let me take a crack at it? So here it is.
That's great.
The music was composed by Brian Urso from Gideon's Mob. He's been involved with Comic Skate for a long time. I remember seeing him around in 2018. And so between me coming up with the idea and Pedro doing the animation and Brian doing the music and then Mike doing the logo, it's definitely a team effort, and I'm happy to be able to finally show it off. It's like you got something to show off here, Russ.
Yeah, I just started to show a page from what's going on at the moment. I've had to slow down production. Sorry, everybody. There will be updates very soon, but that's because of things totally beyond my control. But have no fear, production is still continuing at pace. So there you go. There's a page from the book that's just the pencils, but the ink's going to be done pretty soon. So
it looks like D has had better days.
D's in trouble there, but they're a team, so things will be okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining the show, everyone. I'd like to say thanks to Russ. Oh, Mike says, can I share the logo on Twitter? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to be doing the same. So thank you again for all your work on that, Mike. I really appreciate it. And Amanda B says, great job, Pedro. Yeah, Pedro is working on something else for me as we speak. It's an animated teaser trailer. And then he's also going to be doing the campaign trailer. So look forward to showing those when they're ready. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Russ. And thank you, JP. Really enjoyed speaking with you. And have enjoyed seeing you in and around CG. And all the best on Noirlem. I think it looks like a great story. And hope you've got nothing but success with it and your other projects from here on out.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me a reason to take a day off from work today.
Glad I could help. All right, everybody. Take care. Make it a great day.
Yeah. See you. Speak soon.
Don't let authority stop you from doing what you love. You are in control.